All right, let's dive deep today into the mind of David Goggins. We're breaking down one of his YouTube videos from a transcript. He really kind of lays it all out there. We're talking about mindset and pushing limits and digging deep into what you're really capable of.
Yeah, Goggins definitely has a unique way of motivating people. He doesn't shy away from the tough stuff.
Yeah.
And that raw honesty really connects with people.
It's like a punch in the face, but in a good way, right? So what I'm curious about is how Goggins actually translates those experiences into advice that we can use. He's always talking about the brain being our most powerful weapon, especially in tough times. But how do we actually wield that weapon?
That's a great question. And that's what gets interesting. See, Goggins isn't just like spouting these motivational slogans. He's tapping into a fundamental truth about the human mind. Think about it. Every decision you make, every action you take, it stems from a thought. And those thoughts have a real impact on your reality.
Okay, so instead of letting our thoughts control us, we need to become the masters of our own minds. But how do we do that, especially when we're facing challenges?
Well, Goggins actually talks a lot about this, especially his own struggles, particularly his academic challenges early on. He couldn't just passively absorb information. He had to wrestle with it, break it down, and repeat it until it stuck. And this is where the idea of deliberate practice comes in.
I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I fully grasp it. Is it just about practicing something over and over?
It's more nuanced than that. Deliberate practice is really about focused, intentional effort towards mastery, breaking a skill down into these smaller components and working on each one meticulously. It's not just going through the motions. It's about actively engaging and seeking out feedback to constantly improve.
So it's not just mindless repetition, it's pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone, even when it feels difficult.
Exactly. And Goggins, he embodies this idea perfectly.
Yeah.
Remember that story he tells about learning to swim? He was negatively buoyant, sinking like a rock, but he kept going back, day after day, until his mind finally caught up. With his determination, it's like he forced his brain to adapt by sheer willpower.
That's wild, and it really highlights that. Even seemingly impossible things can be accomplished with consistent effort. But Goggins doesn't stop there. He takes it a step further with this whole idea of embracing the new norm.
Yeah, this is where Goggins gets really radical. He talks about how he lived in a $7 a month apartment, and later he endured the brutal conditions of Navy SEAL training. And instead of resisting those harsh realities, he actually leaned into them.
But he intentionally sought out discomfort. That seems a bit extreme, doesn't it?
It might sound counterintuitive, but there's a psychological principle at play here called climatization. Our bodies and minds are incredibly adaptable. What might seem unbearable at first can become our baseline if we gradually expose ourselves to it.
So he's basically saying we can rewire our perception of what's normal by pushing our boundaries.
Precisely. And the key is to approach these challenges with intention. Goggins didn't just passively endure hardship. He actively redefined his reality by telling himself, this is my new normal.
I'm starting to see the power in that. It's like by reframing our perspective, we can tap into a level of resilience that we didn't even know we had. Have you ever experienced something similar, where you had to redefine your new normal?
Well, let's just say that. Researching and analyzing all this information definitely requires a certain level of mental stamina.
That's a good point. But Goggins takes this concept even further, right? He talks about tapping into this feeling of invincibility. What exactly does he mean by that? It sounds a bit superhuman.
It's not about becoming literally indestructible. It's about developing an unshakable belief in your ability to overcome obstacles. Think about it. When you face a challenge head on, when you refuse to back down, something remarkable happens. You tap into a primal instinct, the fight-or-flight response. And Goggins is all about choosing to fight.
So he's saying by harnessing this primal energy, we can push past our limits and achieve things we never thought possible.
Exactly. He uses that image of running on broken feet during SEAL training. It's like he transcended the physical pain by tapping into this deeper reserve of mental strength.
Okay, that's starting to make sense. But I have to admit, some of this stuff sounds intense. How can someone who struggles with self-doubt or fear even begin to access that level of invincibility?
That's a great question. And it brings us to one of Goggins' most crucial insights, the importance of self-discovery. He believes that true peace, that deep sense of contentment, doesn't come from avoiding challenges. but from facing them head on.
So he's saying that the path to invincibility actually starts with confronting our weaknesses and understanding who we are.
Precisely. And this is where the concept of accountability comes in. Goggins believes that holding yourself to a higher standard, even when it's uncomfortable, is essential for growth.
That resonates with me. It's easy to get complacent, to go through the motion. But Goggins is challenging us to step outside our comfort zones, to become the best versions of ourselves.
And that's where the real magic happens. By embracing discomfort, by pushing past our limits, we unlock a level of potential that we never even knew we had.
This is a lot to unpack. Goggins' philosophy is intense, but it's also incredibly empowering. I'm starting to see how his experiences can be applied to everyday life, even if we're not training to be Navy SEALs.
It's not about being superhuman. It's about realizing you have more strength, more resilience than you give yourself credit for.
It's easy to think, oh, I could never do that. But maybe we're underestimating ourselves.
Exactly. Goggins talks about how when he was 297 pounds, working a dead-end job, he thought he was trying hard. But when he woke up to his potential, he realized he hadn't even scratched the surface.
Like he had this whole other gear he didn't know existed. That can be motivating.
He actually says the scariest thing was the thought that could have been his life. Just coasting along, never challenging himself.
A lot of people can relate to that, wondering if they're living up to their full potential.
And Goggins is saying, no, you're not. You can do better. But he's not just being harsh. He's offering a way to break free.
And that path involves a lot of hard work. He's not a fan of just trying hard.
Right. He calls that a trap. We convince ourselves we're putting in the effort, but we're staying in our comfort zones. He's talking about a level of commitment where you're almost obsessed, pushing boundaries. It becomes your new normal.
So it's not just doing more, it's changing your mindset.
It's about embracing the suck. It's about leaning into those difficult moments, knowing that's where the growth happens. Have you ever accomplished something really challenging and felt that satisfaction afterwards?
Absolutely. Like when I finished that massive research project, exhausted, but proud.
Exactly. And that's the feeling Goggins is chasing, those moments of intense struggle, the times we want to give up, but we keep pushing. That's where we discover what we're made of.
He keeps coming back to invincibility. Is it really about feeling like you can conquer anything?
It's not about being indestructible. It's about unshakable belief in your ability to overcome obstacles. Remember that image, running on broken feet. During SEAL training,
Yeah.
he wasn't invincible, but he had this mental toughness that allowed him to transcend the pain, to keep moving forward.
So almost like a mental trick.
More than a trick. It's about tapping into a deeper motivation, a commitment that overrides the urge to quit.
He even talks about how he had to become the devil. Not literally, of course.
Right, it's a metaphor. He's talking about this ruthless part of himself, to push past his limits.
So we all have a little bit of that devil inside us.
I think what he's saying is sometimes we need that inner grit, that raw determination. It's not about being mean, but about being unflinching in your pursuit.
So channeling that intensity.
Exactly. It's about choosing to fight, even when you want to run.
He's challenging us to find our own hell week.
Not suggesting we all go through military training, but he is urging us to find those crucibles, those challenges that force us to confront our limits. It could be a work project, a personal goal, or a new workout routine.
Most challenges lead to growth. And that inner peace.
He has this great quote, "You don't find peace first. You find it on the other side of self-discovery." True peace comes from knowing you faced your fears and emerged stronger.
It's about the journey. But how do we apply that to our lives?
Goggins would say it starts with self-awareness. He talks about how he was a scared kid.
So he's taken his biggest weakness and turned it into his strength.
Exactly. He's embraced his past.
Sounds like we need to get honest with ourselves, figure out how to use those parts to our advantage.
He's not saying it's easy. Self-reflection can be tough, but it's essential if we want to unlock our potential.
And that potential is far greater than we realize. He keeps coming back to invincibility.
Yeah.
How does that tie into self-discovery?
Goggins talks about figuring out how the brain works. A lot of our limitations are self-imposed. We let fear and doubt hold us back. When we confront those thoughts, we can tap into our inner strength.
So invincibility isn't about being fearless, it's about managing those fears.
Recognizing that fear is natural, but it doesn't have to control us. Goggins uses that image of being at SEAL training at 3:30 in the morning, duct taping his broken feet, knowing he's going up against healthy guys.
Wow.
And yet, he still showed up. He chose to fight. That's what invincibility looks like. It's not the absence of fear, it's the willingness to push through it.
It's about that decision. Do you give in or do you tap into that power?
He makes an interesting connection to our sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight response. When we're in those moments, we have a choice. Let fear paralyze us
Yeah.
or harness that adrenaline.
So he's not denying fear. He's saying we have more control.
Exactly. Our bodies are designed to overcome. It's about trusting that strength.
Taking ownership, recognizing we're capable of more.
And this idea of invincibility ties into peace. Coming from self-discovery, peace is the reward.
He says you don't find peace first. You find it on the opposite end of self-discovery. It's about embracing the challenge.
He makes a powerful point about accountability. It's miserable, it's hard,
Yeah.
but essential for growth.
It's about holding yourself to a higher standard.
Goggins is offering a different path, a path that requires discipline and a willingness to confront ourselves.
So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away?
You have the power to shape your reality. It won't be easy, but you are capable of so much more.
It's about pushing past limitations, embracing the struggle, discovering that potential. You have a choice to play it safe or become the best version of yourself.
And maybe you'll even find some peace.
That's it for this deep dive into the mind of David Goggins. I hope you found this insightful and maybe even inspiring. Until next time, keep diving deep.